Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. We now accept the fact that learning is a lifelong process of keeping abreast of change. And the most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. Peter Drucker.
Love that.
I'm back with my good friend, Carl Eppolito, founder, social CSM, consultant, advisor, tenured thinker in the corporate and private matrix of the world. We're going to unpack some of that today. AI connoisseur, expert, thought pundit, and previous go-to-market strategy, sales strategy, consultative processes in tech and software. So much more, kind of like a part two, unpacking some things from last time. Thanks for coming back.
Man, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
What do you think of that quote, right? So I picked this based on our last dialogue. We now accept the fact that learning is a lifelong process of keeping abreast of change, and the most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. That was Peter Drucker himself.
Man, that's so good. I mean, with the first four words, we now must. So that then right there, we've already assumed, a set of circumstances. We've already agreed on a set of circumstances. I think of just that introduction of that quote, and I'm like, who is the we? Right? At what point do we become the we? Is there a certain enlightenment level? Do we have, whether it's wisdom, experience, what have we learned? This that intro, those first four words are really, there's a lot to unpack there. And as a father, you learn quite quickly that our job is to not only teach our children, but I think it's really to teach them how to think, teach them how to learn, whether it's education, whether that's a skill, a sport, an art, the process of learning and teaching that to our children, I think is the ultimate job of a parent. So I love that quote.
In the dichotomy of parent to child or pundit to student, whether they're aware of it or not, like from a content standpoint, why are people like you succeeding at such a rapid pace on these TikTok platforms and these social platforms when, the general milieu are just maybe distracted and unfocused and just completely engrossed in somebody else's product distribution? I guess, that's the short version of the question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a $10,000 question with a $10 million answer. I love that. I don't wish my knowledge on anybody on how I got it. And what I mean is, I went through a divorce 6 years ago, and there's a lot of phases in the post-divorce experience. One of them that I found to be successful is looking back at all of your relationships. So clearly this relationship truly failed. Whether you're right or wrong, they're right or wrong, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, a very substantial and important relationship in your life failed. And if you can, to step back and truly think to yourself, all of the areas that I could have got something wrong, or I could have changed something, or just take complete ownership and say, I'm going to take ownership over everything that happened, simply to unpack it all. I say that to say, one of the things I learned is simple communication. The way that I say something to you and the way that you receive what I'm saying are so different. They're so different. And we don't care about that in most of our lives, most of our interactions. And especially if we think we're coming from a good place, and if we say it and it's received differently, talk about getting defensive. If we think it's from a good place, right? So then look at your relationships, where we really should start thinking about, are they hearing me the same way that I'm speaking it? Are they understanding it the same way that I'm speaking it? And I had to really be honest with myself after my divorce. Like, man, I have all these good intentions with what I want to say, but how is it getting received? So fast forward to the social media and the content world, everyone has a message that they want to share. I don't think enough people are thinking to themselves, how is this message received? And then furthermore, my target audience that I want to reach, do they receive information in the ways that I'm sharing it? Do I understand how they receive information? Do I understand how they want to receive information? Do I understand what information they want to receive? Like you have to start completely all the way there. And then when you do, you can start to reverse engineer how you share your message. And what I found is that it's vastly different than what one might think if they're just going to create content on their own. Does that make sense?
Well, how is it helpful to create content?
Because I don't create content for myself. You're either a consumer or a creator. You cannot be both. Most people scroll and most people consume. If you're truly going to create, then it's not for me. I mean, I think there's a certain level of ego in everybody, but if you would like to be successful, you have to have your customer or your audience at the forefront. And so when you think of who you either want to impact, inspire, educate, or be humorous to, right? So all content should either be funny, make somebody laugh, it should educate them, inspire them, right? Or it should teach them something. It's really all, it should be inspirational, teaching, / knowledge, or humor. You could break all content down to those 3 buckets, especially all successful content.
What do you think of this podcasting thing?
That's a really interesting question. I've got a good friend of mine in Utah, and his whole entire business is managing the back end on podcast. And he does some of the biggest podcasts in the world. And so we talk about this because on the forefront, I say it's useless. Most people just quote unquote start a podcast. Like everything else, that's useless just to do. I think that podcast can be leveraged as a leveraged media. I think when it's leveraged, I think it's brilliant. Most people interact in their daily life in a conversation. Capturing conversations, I think, is brilliant. Storytelling, if you can capture somebody who can storytelling has always been, and I think will always be, the best way to sell anything. Because stories have emotions and they have a climax, they have a resolution, etc. Capturing conversations as a form of media and then leveraging that through video, through short form video, understanding how the platforms play with content. I mean, Jay, you've done a great job with this with your reaction videos. I've noticed this.
Someone?
Do what?
Did you see it?
Yeah, with your reaction videos, right? Where you're like watching it, and you have the split screen and you're watching one thing, and then I think those are phenomenal. I think it's great when you tease your podcast with some of your content. I think that podcasting by itself, I don't know the legs that it has, but I don't think anything by itself has a lot of legs. I think podcasts can be, my 2 newest clients are all built around quote unquote podcasting. How we capture that is going to create so much content for them. It's going to be amazing. So as a leveraged media, I think it's incredible.
What did you like about the review thing? What's there?
So I like how you're watching. So I had to actually kind of reverse.
It could be anybody that you could unpack. It doesn't have to be me, but
yeah. So I just yours was one of the first ones that I saw. So on the bottom part of that video, you see the actual video. On the top part, you see you watching it, and I can watch your natural reactions. And that would be my biggest, especially anything like this. You know, you might record it a few times to get your perfect reaction in quotes, but really, if you can just record it those first few times you might watch it to give a really raw reaction, I'm watching you react, first of all, more than anything else. And then I respect you, right? So you definitely have built yourself into, if nothing else, if I know nothing else about you, right, wrong, smart, not smart, you think. You are definitely not empty when it comes to what has gone in and out of your head. And so when you address a topic, at the bare minimum, I know that you have at least applied a level of intellect to whatever it is you're reviewing. So for me, I enjoy that. I'm gonna hold on for 30 more seconds to see what you think about this. It's a really engaging form of content. I don't think enough people are doing it.
What, yeah, is this something you've recently seen?
I've seen it with yours a couple of times. So you got to understand too. So content is ruined for me.
Because we haven't seen a lot of this,
No,
at least in
and
my view.
you haven't. And but I'm putting
Why do you think it's pulling into people, you know? What about that? What about that?
there's
Is
two
it David
reasons.
and Goliath?
There's two reasons. One is that it is a copycat industry. You see everybody just follows the biggest trends. And there's trends and fads, right? Fads come and go. And trends are actually things that'll happen over time, and they have some longevity. So people copycat in the content space. I mean, it's crazy. And I'm only on social media now to understand the trends. I don't watch it for any other reason anymore. I'm completely deluded to what it offers outside of, I just break down content whenever I watch something. Every 30 seconds, I'm looking at it for different stuff. It is completely undervalued. It is completely underutilized. It is not difficult to make. And it's authentic because I'm getting your reaction. So I love the authenticity, but then I respect you intellectually so that I'm getting your perspective. That's why I think it is so, you're using somebody else's hook because it's their content up front. I mean, creating a hook is one of the most difficult aspects, right? You're leveraging someone else's hook. You are letting it play out for 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds, right? So now you're getting that whole idea of the longer watch time you get, the better the algorithms and platforms like you, and they push your content if you get longer watch times. And then because I respect your actual perspective, I'm going to watch your reaction to it. I think it's better than the vertical side by sides. I really like it, and I'm going to push it on all of my clients in the next month.
That's interesting and exciting.
People don't want to see what they're seeing from everybody else right now. You are going to see all those flashes and like a person's talking and then it has a video in the background and then this thing's flashing up. It's nauseating, and I'm telling you, you're going to see a big pullback from that.
Yeah. Why do you think some people may not be wanting to do those review videos?
They're different. I mean, it's really easy to see somebody else have success first. I don't think I don't think everyone is comfortable giving their opinion on something publicly that either they're not an expert in, or they're just not either egotistical or cocky enough to have a perspective in, which means you only end up reviewing the exact same kind of content. I think you have to have a level of value to add. And man, this sounds terrible. And I just don't think many people do. I mean,
Well, how can someone gauge whether they're inept or not, you think, listening to this? If you were to see, break down some self-awareness exercise here.
yeah, that's there. You don't even need to be aware. It's Jesse Itzler talks about this, right? So 100 hours a year. If you spend 100 hours a year on something, you'll be better than 95% of people in the world at that craft. And that breaks down to 18 minutes a day. 18 minutes a day on any singular thing consistently, right? That's the key ingredient here, is the consistency. Will make you better than 95% of people in the world at that thing. I have my daughters are 8 and 10. I have them that on that method every day. They don't have to have crazy workouts or intense workouts, or they don't do that every day, but they do their craft for 18 minutes every single day. If you can dedicate 18 minutes every single day to whatever singular thing you would like to be an expert in, your confidence to talk about it will go to the roof. I think what we see happen is that if I say, hey man, give me 18 minutes a day on something, and I check back in 10 days, they gave me 6 days. That's just most people. That's actually the vast majority of people. If I say, hey, how'd you do in your 10 days? The person that says, I gave you 8, it's not crazy. It's not 3 hours. Like, hey, I gave you 18 minutes for 10 days. Awesome. Let's look where you were 10 days ago. Wow, it's crazy. Let's do this in 20 days. And then they start having a conversation with somebody about this topic, and they're like, wow, wait, I kind of know. I do know a little bit. I don't know a lot, but I know a little bit. And then that they just have they have a stack of wins that tells them, who they say they are, and that confidence can skyrocket, absolutely skyrocket. So if you feel inept, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Spend 18 minutes a day and get better.
Did you see the review? I guess, what do you call it? What do you call those videos? Interaction videos with What did
I
you
mean,
call
I just
them?
call them the split screen review videos. Yeah,
Yeah, so I had one that I thought got the least engagement.
there's reason for that.
And my hypothesis was even those that agreed, they may not say anything based on how like maybe all right, the closer they are to the person, like physically within proximity, they'd be less likely to disagree in public, but more likely to kind of say under their breath in a crowded room, close up to my ear and be like, by the way, that was really sick. Because that's what happened. So I was thinking about this phenomenon. I don't know. I'm curious if you have any psychological thoughts around this, because you're a thoughtful guy, clearly.
Yeah, I think that
Like,
this,
what does it take to say something before the crowd?
so it's just not going to happen. On the negative aspects of this,
Because this is, I'll add something. I think if I'm disagreeing with someone that has significantly more power based on the culture, how they perceived the level of, like, it's David and Goliath.
yeah, but so this we talked about this on our first episode, where the entire reason I built a relationship with the CEO of Wawa was because I disagreed with his hypothesis on culture mattering or not. I don't think that people actually.
Well, yeah, with this person, but how many people at that table may have wanted to rip you limb from limb,
They
depending
didn't.
on if
Well,
they're click or not.
but they're shocked that I said anything, right? I think that I just simply don't think that people. I don't think that people have the backbone to share what they really think. That's why you have keyboard warriors. I mean, but they're not. No one's going to show up at your house. I think we've definitely have created a society where you get away with a lot, and you don't have to actually pay the toll for some of the things that you might say from afar. I think that we're in a part of society where people would rather send your video to somebody else and say something negative about you to somebody else by sending that video to them, and that makes them feel seen if they think that person agrees with them, rather than having the actual goal to write a negative comment, because writing the negative comment is public. So then the question becomes, do I want the world to know that I disagree, or do I want Jay to know that I disagree? And how far am I willing to stand out? And then does this topic matter enough to me for me to even have to feel the insecurity of the eyeballs on me? I think that's why you don't get pushback in the comments unless they're just completely asshole comments, which I've gotten those before on my content, and you just block and delete those people. You don't know them. But if you do know them, the negative comments are the not negative, the pushback comments, the challenging your perspective comments. I just don't think they just don't happen. Me and you have an experience about this. Do you remember when you were reading your books and I sent you the message and I said, Jay, are you counting audiobooks as books you've read this year? And you had a perfect response to me. You said, can you please go write that in the comments?
Yes, yeah.
And he was like, people need to see your thought process of that. You remember that conversation we had?
Yeah, and there's a reason I asked you to put it before the square, because yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
But no, but I mean, I'm like, as I'm thinking through this, I'm even guilty of this.
Well, what do you think's happening to our culture as it relates to these platforms? I mean, that's a broad question. Let me make it more specific.
Okay.
What could be the consequences of just being able to erase somebody?
Oh, that's
Just,
able to
right? You
erase,
want to
as
talk
in,
about AI, right? Like, the future. What could be the consequences to our culture of being able to erase? Example, like when you called me with frankly, helpful feedback. Because I think, what an important distinction to make between physically reading and listening to audio, because everyone that may not be listening to audio because they either think they can't or blah, 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 may just be associating when I say reading with physically reading and never even realize that they actually could gain value from listening to audiobooks. So like that was a helpful, that's just one way of like looking at that. That was such a helpful feedback you gave me. So I said, put it in the comments because other human beings may be afraid to ask.
So that's why that's one reason why I love the comments. I have become very active in comments. It's actually one of the growth strategies that I use with my clients is to become active in the comments. Because you give people permission to ask questions, you give people permission to think a certain way. It also allows you to demonstrate that you are someone that can bring value to a conversation, right? So the original poster will see your comment and they'll appreciate that you are adding value to that conversation. You don't steal followers, you just share audiences. It's a great way to grow your audience, to have thoughtful comments or additional questions. Pardon?
What do you mean you don't steal followers, you just share audiences? What do you mean?
Oh yeah, so like on Instagram or any social platform, for example, I don't have to unfollow you to follow somebody else. So go engage. If there is a creator or a person who has the audience that you are aspiring to have, go find those audiences and engage in those audiences. You're not going to make the original creator upset because everyone knows that if there's engagement in your comments, that all of the platforms like that. So comment with something useful, something thought-provoking, add to the conversation. In addition to anything, something notable, funny, inspirational, educational, same thing in the comment section. And then people will see that because they're following the original content, and they might see your comments and follow you as well. It's a huge strategy to building audiences. So you don't steal followers, you just share audiences. The aspect of society, and I'm bullish on society because I'm raising an 8 and 10-year-old little girl that I know will contribute to society. I'm not bullish on there being a large number of bold leaders, but we've never really had a large number of bold leaders. If you ask every generation, they'll tell you that whatever they're experiencing is the worst thing the country's ever experienced. I just talked to my 93-year-old grandmother about this. And she was like, oh, Carl John, your mother was so scared of beepers and pagers when they came out. And that's what all the drug dealers had. And you wanted one. And oh, she was so nervous. And she was so nervous about the internet. Like I was telling my grandmother about social media. And she said, oh, your mother was so worried about you. Because that was the toughest thing that generation had to face. So everything is subjective. So right now we think that this is the hardest time ever to raise a kid. No, it's the hardest time ever to raise a kid to us, for sure. I think that, I look at it as an amazing opportunity because I'm raising 2 very strong young women who will absolutely be leaders. I don't necessarily think that highly of their competition. I don't think most kids are training academically, spiritually, and physically the way that they train. Also leading with a kind heart. And those are core values in our house. And I know that if my daughters go out into the world with what we're instilling in our house, they'll impact a whole bunch of young people their age that I don't know, I'm confident will have those core values. So if my daughters are at the front, this might sound extremely bold and brash, but I like society's chances.
What else if you were to critique, my presence
on social?
Yeah. What's going on? What's wrong?
I think that
let's just destroy this.
There's not much to destroy.
As Immanuel Kant said, if the truth shall kill them, let them die.
No, I think that I think the world definitely needs to hear what you have to say. I think you are someone that is, I don't know if humility is the right word. I don't know if you're humble and soft-spoken or what it is, but you have way more to say than what is said. Not enough people know about you. And the problem with social media is that it has given a microphone to people that the world doesn't need to hear a damn thing that they have to say. And so we need people like you to speak up. But I mean that very from a sales pitch perspective, because you need me running your social, but also from a perspective of I'm being dead ass serious. Like there are people who have a microphone and we need to take that microphone away from them. But if we don't, then we don't have a pot to piss in. It's our fault if we're not going to step up and contribute to the conversation. I think you have, I don't agree with everything you say. I just appreciate that there's an intellectual point of view being shared, because people who don't agree with me, they need to be educated as well. I don't want a dumb opposition. I get better when I'm intellectually opposed. And so for one, I think you need to do so much more, but that's on a societal level. I think there's a bunch of really interesting, not funny little tweaks with your social. Cutting out all the dry time just doesn't work. So as a thinker, this is really difficult. We get strength in the pause. Social media just doesn't give two rats about the pause. So every ounce of dead space has to get cut out. And there's a bunch of science behind that, but you need your clips to be crisp and quick, and showing that you think in person, one, I think takes a ton of skill to actually do. But showing it visually on video and in social doesn't have the same effect. When you can have a conversation with somebody and sit in the stillness of a 5-second silence, because you're truly thinking before you speak, that holds a lot of weight in negotiations and relationships, but it does not hold that same weight with social. That's not how it's consumed. We got to get to our point. And a lot of times we have to get to the point first, and then we share how we got there. So I think some of your struggle with social is simply understanding how clips are received and digested and how they're cut up and spliced around. Because I think you have incredible content that people really need to hear and see.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean that very. I know the listeners can't see my face, but on my video camera, I'm going to send this to you because yes, I mean this like wholeheartedly.
We're gonna we save all these videos. We're gonna be putting out the videos soon.
I mean that
not even doing the video.
I mean that because, and these aren't bad people like on a character level, but I know guys that all your followers know that have a microphone or putting things out there, and it's just garbage. It's look, I have 3 degrees. You don't need 3 degrees to intellectually contribute to society. You can have wisdom through experience. You could just read. I mean, like you've done so much. You've worked with so many amazing people. I simply don't believe that your comments and your thoughts are numb. I know they're not. And there are so many people sharing numb, shallow content. And what scares me is that it's actually impacting people. People are actually listening to it. So on a philosophical level, if we're going to talk about how we believe the greatest good, or we believe the greatest good for all people, any of them, then like, Jay, you got to put out content. Like we need it.
What do you think that type of conditioning could do to people?
Expand on that. What do you mean?
You mentioned these ideas that people are they're buying ideas that in your mind are not benefiting them. That's kind of what I picked up from that part of it.
It's
so you're saying that
I'm saying you have an inherent or innate, that's funny, either one of those two, obligation to society to contribute in the ways and at the level which you can. Does that make more sense? And there are people who are contributing more, I'm not saying in a good or bad way, who don't have the depth, the knowledge, the intellect that I know you have. And I know that you can affect more people. I don't think it's hurting society, but I think we've numbed society. I don't think we're making anybody better. I used to be an education absolutist, and to a little bit I am, but not nearly as much. So that's obviously not an absolutist. People are consuming content to be inspired, to be educated as well. And I just think you need to share if nothing else, I would love to see this. I want to know how you think. What do you trigger in your head to break something down? Why do you think the way that you do? Forget your perspective, forget your point of view. I want to know everything inside your mind before the point of view, because I don't think we teach people how to think. I don't think we teach people why they should think, why thinking is so, goodness, it is so important. Like, I tell my daughters, y'all get to a bad answer. I'm cool with that. Because when I ask you, how did you arrive at this conclusion? You damn well better have an answer, because the conclusion isn't what's right or wrong. You're going to have millions of conclusions. We have to course correct the path that got you to that conclusion. Like the understanding of critical thinking, the understanding of the stillness that it takes to read, the stillness that it takes to be uncomfortable inside your own mind. We don't teach it. We don't applaud it. I mean, it is lost everywhere in society.
Were you uninspired when you got to corporate America?
I was let down at what it didn't do for me after my divorce. I made all the right choices. Went to high school, 4.0 student, went to college on an academic scholarship, got a great job out of college, took some risk professionally, but they were always, I mean, I break down my risk to the nth degree. So even if something had failed, I knew where I knew if there was a pivot somewhere. Very calculated. Went to graduate school, got my executive education from UNC Chapel Hill. Went to graduate school at Villanova. My dad was a farmer, and the idea that I could go to work and get paid and simply have options, right? It was like, look, if you go to college, you simply have more options. Sure, you can become an entrepreneur, or you can get a job, right? Like the whole idea for me growing up was to have all these options. When your dad's a cotton picker, he didn't have options, right? Options are limited. I went through a difficult time after my divorce. I was traveling 200 days a year. You can't travel that much as a single dad. I tried to hold it together for about a year afterwards.
Was that at
And
Boston?
that was actually at FICO. I went to locked in, so I wouldn't have to travel so much, but I was out every night. It's a very high entertaining world in the commercial insurance strategy world. And that I definitely was, I mean, it might as well have been traveling. I wasn't home. And I was really let down by assumptions that I had placed on the industry myself. So I own this completely. But man, you're only as good as like what you do the next year for them. That's it. Every January you start at zero. You don't build up any you don't build anything up. Like, you're just at zero, and there's somebody else, especially the higher, more profile jobs that I'd had. I mean, there's someone else that wants that role so bad. They're waiting for you to slip. And I used to thrive in that environment, so I was never scared of it. But when I needed someone to have some compassion for what I was going through, man, it's not the right place for it. And it took me a while to get over that it wasn't what I thought, which is what led me into entrepreneurship. I tried a couple of times to go back into corporate software sales. I know software sales so well that, it was that stability. And I truly do believe this in the bottom of my heart. I wasn't doing anything wrong in my life, but God has much different plans for me. I was doing what I wanted to do in my life. And I battled with this. I was like, God, I don't get it. I wasn't a bad guy. I didn't drink a lot, I didn't party a lot. I didn't cheat on my wife. I didn't hit my wife. Like, why? I went to graduate school. I'm a good dad. I'd never rolled a stop sign. I'm like, why do I deserve this? And it wasn't even a woe is me. I was like, I want answers. And what it really came down to was like, man, it's not about you not doing bad things. It's about what right things are you doing. And I'll tell you a story. On February 14th of 2020, my best friend's dad passed away. And I went to his funeral. It was right before COVID hit. And you think about your best friend's parents, you think you know them. Oh, I know Austin's dad. I've known him my whole life, literally since we were born. but I was never a peer with him. I don't know what he's like at work or on the golf course, right? So go to his funeral. And I had this realization about my spirituality right before this. I was just like, man, like I didn't do anything wrong. Why'd you do this to me? Like, I don't understand it. I go to his funeral and there's like 400 people there. It was crazy. I mean, 400 people, and everyone's get up and they're telling stories about him. And they're not stories. I mean, they're like, yo, he's a great guy, but every story was a God story. Every story, all of them were like, how he either brought them to know God or how he exemplified what God looked like and how he had impact. And I was like, if I die tomorrow, no one will say a bad thing about me. They'll say we had a great time together, donated to charities, it's a good son. But man, no one's telling a God story about me. Like no one's saying I changed their life. He had a line of people that wanted everyone to know how Jerry Seiler changed their life. And here I am so mad because like I didn't do anything wrong. So why are you taking this from me, God? And I'm sitting there like I'm in tears in this funeral. And it was like, I have not had a life-changing, impactful moment in anyone's life. That's why God took it from me. His plans were so much bigger. And when I accepted that, I was like, making millions of dollars for corporate America, nothing wrong with it at all. I got a lot of friends in that world still. I think highly of it. But I'm in the changing hearts business. I'm in the changing lives business. I want to change souls in the depth of my heart. And a lot of things changed for me after that.
What do you think it was about you that heard the message?
I really wanted answers. I didn't want to be right. I wanted answers. I wasn't a perfect husband by any means, but I didn't do anything wrong. And that I couldn't get over that. That really it just bothered me. And when I went from defending myself to truly exploring, and then really like I wanted answers and I was okay with whatever they were. I wanted to know. And you'll never know God's plan. He doesn't write it down and give it to you. But it's about being obedient. It's about listening. It's about praying. It's about, especially when you feel that he's talking to you and he's giving you some direction. It's a lot of it's about being obedient and doing that. I was simply ready to listen. When you're ready to listen, and he'll talk to you all day long. And I was ready to listen. And not ready to listen because I was like, oh, if you'll tell me, I promise I'll never do this again. We've all had those kind of conversations. I wanted to know. And unfortunately, it took my best friend's, father's funeral. I wish I had learned a different way. But I've never seen a line full of grown men talking about how someone impacted their life. And I said, that's what I want my deathbed to look like. I've got to be in the business of changing hearts and changing lives. But I was willing to listen. I think that's why I heard the message.
Had that not happened, what do you think COVID would have been like? That was right before. For you,
So I have a pretty strong faith, not one I ever challenged before as much as I challenged. So in 2020, I read the Bible like I had never read it before. I wanted to know the characters in the movie. And I grew up Catholic, which means we're told to sit down and just listen and that's it. And I was ready if I was going to be a Christian, right? So I mean, 70% of the world is monotheistic. They believe in a God. That's the entire Muslim faith, entire Jewish faith, and the entire Christian faith, just right there. The Muslim faith believes in Muhammad. We believe in Christ, and Jewish faith simply believes Christ hasn't come yet. There's not a whole lot of difference. The one difference is what the entire Christian faith hinges on, and that's that Jesus rose from the dead on the third day, and you know that's that's resurrection is the difference between all of them. Outside of that, they all believe in very similar stuff, and I had never explored it. I wanted to know who the disciples were. I couldn't have told you, Jay. I couldn't have told you who wrote the New Testament. Like, I didn't know my faith, and so I just started studying. Like that funeral led me to getting curious. And I started studying. I started treating the Bible like it was a history book, which it is. It's the most verified document in all of human history. And I just started studying it. And I don't know. I don't know what COVID would have been like. I don't think about that often. But I do. What I do think about often is what my future is going to look like if I don't have that at my center, for sure. So I keep it there.
Someone listening to this that they want to move in that direction, what's your advice?
I love that question a lot, because I remember the day that I was in church, and I thought to myself, man, this is the day that I'm going to leave the Catholic Church. This is so weird. It didn't fit. And I went, my daughters and I went to a different church. That church actually ended up closing down during COVID, and we found the church that we're at now. When I left the Catholic church that I was at, it wasn't a place for us anymore, but it is definitely a place for someone else that walked in that door. You know, church is the vehicle. I think that it's difficult for people to say, like, well, it's my own relationship and I can do it on my own, and I don't need to go to church. Might be true, but the reality is that you need something to kind of keep you at a center point to help you then, while you're on your own, grow and learn and expand. It's a net positive to go to church. Finding one for you, there's a little bit of effort that has to get put into that, for sure. Not every church is going to be a great fit. That's why so many exist. That's the beautiful aspect of it, for sure. I went to 5 or 6. They were a perfect fit for somebody else, though. The church that I'm at right now isn't a perfect fit for everybody. And I'm sure there might be a day where I might leave that one, and the day that we walk out, someone new is going to walk in there. I think if someone says, I'd really like to explore, or I'd really like to start, I think getting back to the consistency that we talked about on the 18 minutes a day. My daughters and I, every morning we wake up, we simply say, God, thank you for the day. Not everyone got to wake up today. And every single night we simply say, God, thanks for today. I know I wasn't perfect. I'm gonna try harder tomorrow. Give me tomorrow. I know I got more in me. That's it. Just start with that. My second thing I would say is go find a church. And it's okay if you find the wrong one first. Like I said, we went to 5 or 6. Go find somewhere. Because when you find the right place, it moves you. It really does. And once the Holy Spirit moves in you, once you feel God in your heart, man, it's hard. It's a hard thing to walk away from when it's pure. Problem is, there's a lot of impurity. There's the humans. Man's involved. Man is far from perfect. We mess up everything. That's where I start.
Do you think about the afterlife?
A lot more recently. For 2 reasons. One, I love my life. Like, my daughters and I are in just a really rad part of life. And I've never been more grateful. I've never been more aware of it. It is just a really cool part of life, man. Like, I for probably the first time in a really, really, really long time, I'm like, man, I don't want to lose any of this. Now, like, I would love to meet somebody. I'd love to get married again one day. You know, I'd love to have a bigger house, whatever, all this stuff. But dude, if I never have anything else besides what I have right now, I'm telling you, dude, you'll never not see me smile. So I think about it a little bit from that perspective. I've thought a little bit from the perspective of what is it? Like, just, I mean, when you start studying scripture, it's not just heaven and hell. That's not really what's talked about. There's levels of this game. And I think more so, I'd be lying if I said I was excited for the afterlife, because I love this one, but I believe in it, so I don't fear it at all. Whenever it comes, there's a reason. I was ready to be called. I'm gonna take that journey for sure. For sure. I fear nothing except for God's wrath. I think it's a very fascinating point in your life when you truly do accept that. I will say I've never been more aware of the fact that the devil lives among us. Hell is not something below the earth's crust. The phrase hell on earth is extremely real. We live in hell. Devil's all around us. Evil is all around us. And the stronger you get with your faith, the stronger you know that you're protected from it. But also, the more you realize how prevalent it is. And it is. I think that thought keeps me up more than the idea of the afterlife. I don't fear it. And whenever that day comes, I'm ready for it.
What if Jesus had a podcast?
I don't know who the hell would host it, man. I hope he would have to host it, but he can't. That's not his thing, right? Like, he likes to, like, I can't imagine him. I think better yet, because he was so good at speaking differently to different types of people. So I just think to myself, like, he didn't sin with sinners, but he went to the sinners. And so I'm like, man, what would you be like on Joe Rogan's podcast? And what would he be like on Ed Milet's podcast? And what would he be like on this podcast? I'm like, I would just be so fascinated to see how he reaches all the audiences. So that's what he did so well. I would love to see how he loves on, I mean, this would be such an amazing lesson. I would love to see how he loves on people who disagree with him, who spit on him. I think it's an easy thing that we read about in scripture, but we've seen the riots. We've seen what vitriol and hate look like in the last 3 years. That man was spat on, beaten, like, but we read about it. We don't see it. I think it would be fascinating for today's world to see someone go through what he went through and stand up and love people the way he still loved them. I do think we've lost that.
What do you mean?
I think that I don't think we realize what he went through and how he literally turned the other cheek and loved people. I don't think we comprehend it because we don't see it. I think we see things like the riots. I think we see the hate, the left and the right, the BLM. We see that, but what we don't see is somebody who's in the middle of it, receiving all of it and saying, I still love you. I still love you. I still got love for you. That character, that person, that presence is absent. All the hate's present right now. Man, we're split on every which way, every which thing. And if you can hate somebody, man, you can find a way to hate them. And obviously, one of the beauties of Christ was that he found the way to love you. So he did. Found a way to love you. The only way you're going to share his message is if somebody has an open heart. The only way you're going to open someone's heart is love on them. And I think that is a really difficult thing to do when times are good. I think it's an extremely difficult thing to do when times are tense.
How do I love someone if they block me?
Well, I feel as though I must have just been texting you before I got on this because I'm battling with this.
That this is where my angst comes up from, you know,
You can't
social platforms.
you can't
They
throw
give us,
you
I mean,
can't throw your love on anybody, man. If you don't, if they don't, if people aren't open to receiving, then they're not open to receiving, right? So it isn't like Jesus broke into people's houses and forced them to break bread with him. He invited them, right? And they heard some of the other great things that he did. But man, I've got people, I've got a situation in my life at the moment, and if people have a thought about you that they're not moving from, you show them through acts on how you act, how you treat other people. But man, you move on with that, with trying to change, with trying to change their minds, that they block you, because you're just going to be, you're going to get viewed as a lunatic if you're going to try to sit here and like force feed to someone who is just steadfast in their ways to disagree with you. Time is the only way that rock gets moved. I've had to learn this the hardest of ways, because people who knew me before I had a social media presence, they don't all believe that it was built with good intentions. And that might be for podcast number 3, but was. I actually started on TikTok because I didn't know anyone there, so I could be my authentic self and not fear the judgment. And honestly, that was a weak move. I should have started on Instagram because I should never have been fearful of the judgment, but I was, and so I went somewhere completely organic and completely new. If they're gonna have that perspective, if they're not willing to call you, ask you, then there's nothing. I don't think there's nothing you can do to shove it down their throats and be like, that's of course it's all authentic, and then they're not trying to hear it. It's tough. It's very tough, and you're very public.
what is?
I say in your profile, you're very public. So I'm sure that you've either gotten messages or comments, or you've gotten pushbacks on social, or because of social.
Yeah,
So how does that affect you? How do you process that?
I keep it there. And I find that I agree with them. Like, I don't like me then either. Like, that guy sucked, but at Kierkegaard, what if everything in life were backwards and or we're a misunderstanding and laughter were really tears? That's how I feel about the whole thing.
That's so funny.
Yeah, like I can vividly see. I'm going to see one of my enemies in a couple weeks. I'm excited because I never listened to them in the first place. That's part of the reason why. I could argue from the standpoint that we were together in labor in this context. We were together in business. I could argue because I didn't listen, so I attracted someone that was of my lesser. But I think that would already put me in a self-negation of because ultimately I was exactly who I was, and I was with exactly who I was going to be with. And at least one thing we can absolutely agree on, which is I don't like that version of me either. And I definitely am aware that I didn't ever listen to this person. So I'm very excited to learn who they are in a whole different view. And no, I have a list, Carl. I have a list of enemies, and a lot. I just went and saw one the other day. I missed him, but I texted him, and we're going to get together. Now, a lot of these are invoked, meaning provoked, rather. I could be really mean and cruel very easily without really realizing.
So what do you consider? What do you consider?
I've hurt a lot of people, and I got to try. I am definitely going to be. I'm constantly judged, and I'm answering this in a couple different ways. Number one is, if it happens on social media, it's very important that it stays there because, if I'm going to do this whole thing, influence, power, all this, I have to tell everybody what's really going on. Like the emperor has no clothes.
Yeah.
Like I'm preparing I'm preparing. I've always been preparing for that.
Right.
Like I'm naked, dude. Don't follow me. I have there's no reason to follow me. So, you know, number one is I leave it there. I responded to one last year, and I could speculate who I think it was. And if it's who I think it was, I told them the truth. Like, you have a really good, and they really did hurt me. And it was right there in the public forum. It's right there before the crowd. And they have ammunition and they used it. And I asked, like, hey, well, firstly, I agree with you because I do with a lot of these points. And this is how I see things now. They weren't happy that that's how I responded, because the next thing was kind of like, it was a rationalization, like, and hey, but even in that, in their defense, I'm very good at getting out of things. Yeah. So I just try to agree. I just try to figure out. I just agree with them. Like I wouldn't be.
So would they view you as an enemy as well?
If I was a saint, I wouldn't be doing this shit. I'd be a stockbroker.
Well, would they view you as an enemy as well?
I have no idea.
Because now I'm like, wait, were we ever enemies?
Well, okay, so here's how I define the terms of the enemy. It's like whoever disagrees with me at any given point.
Yeah, but I view that as a friend, man. So I'm in the muck.
I don't understand the distinction of the two. That's like my enemies and my friends are the exact same potential.
No. It's keep your friends closer, enemies closer. Only trust one of them.
Well, so here we go. Trust. I'm looking at trust as past tense, belief future tense, and forgiveness beyond space and time.
But
so
forgiveness is not forgetfulness, though.
Forgiveness is a loss, meaning I'm taking it out. It's my crucifixion. I lose, you win. It's okay. And meaning right. So I'm looking at, this is how if I were to put it into like an algorithm, trust is based on the past. So let's say you didn't keep your word on something.
Right.
I have less trust. Now I can tell you how I feel and how I think, and we could potentially work through it. I could say nothing and I could tell other people how I don't trust you. And then before you know it, now I'm paranoid. You're worse than I thought. They don't like you. And that's like, the essence of hell on earth, right? One of the ways that manifests. So trust is based on the past. We confuse belief and trust. Belief is a projection of the future. So it's like, I see Carl online, Jay online. I never spent any time with you. You never spent any time with me. I believe in you. I may call it trust, but I believe. I have a idealism. It's like, what do you represent to me? What do I represent to you? What do people represent to us? So like belief, I think, is future tense. It's like possibility. Trust is based on past tense. Forgiveness is like the great equalizer. It just cleanses the palate. You could get, stabbed in the stomach and you could still forgive the person. Now, does that mean you're going to be able to? Maybe not necessarily. You probably won't be able to do it alone. Maybe you'll need help. So I'm caught in this. I'm trying to figure it out. That's kind of like a big motivator for me, dude, is to try to figure this out. And I think because, I don't know why. I wouldn't want Schopenhauer. You can do what you want. You can't want what you want. So to answer your question more succinctly, God, I appreciate you asking, by the way. Like, what a gift. Because, here we are, we're talking about this.
I love this. It's the best, though.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate you asking. Because how I've approached it is I have certain principles that I haven't really written down like a constitution, but I'm going to keep the comment. I'm going to interact with the person. And I'm going to let it sit there. And then the more information the world has about me, the more likely that my power won't obstruct the individual choice of other people. Don't follow me. So like, I'm not building, no, by the way, this is not a case against what you said earlier, which I agree with. I'd like to have followers from a worldly perspective. Sure, why not? But I'm saying, be careful of me, you know? All right. I don't like, meaning, don't get too close. Before you know it, you're going to realize I'm just like you and I'm really nothing other than what I am. So like,
Mhm.
don't worship me. So,
That's not your cross to bear, though.
I'm just saying, this is how I look at the comments. This is how I look at the enemies. It's like, I do carry it around, right? Now, how much of that is just me needing to be liked? Well, if that's the case, what a gift to be this insecure. Because apparently it's a helpful message for people. I'll tell you this, it's really helped me. Like, I have relationships today that I, should, as a subjective, there's no reason for me to have them based on what we've been through.
Well, then that would be a friend.
Well, but if you, let's say someone betrays you or you betray somebody, who do you have to be a friend again? Well, I'm saying friend and an enemy, I don't see the distinction. I think it's a temporal spatial thing. So it's based on how we relate to one another. Like, all my enemies were my friends at one point.
That's
I mean,
because,
there was an admiration in them.
well, that's because only people close to you can hurt you.
I guess the question becomes like,
And also, people will always remember you for the person you were when they met you.
I just don't believe in enemies. Like, beyond language, it's kind of like that hater thing.
No, for sure, right? So there's nothingness. Like, I believe in friends, family, peers, acquaintances, and then nothingness. Like, I don't believe in enemies either, because honestly, like, for you to be considered an enemy of mine, I have to put so much thought into you. Then it's like, then we should just eliminate the enemy, right? Like, enemies.
What if that's
Enemies are to
below
be,
our awareness?
enemies are to be
It's of our
eliminated.
nature to do that.
To do what?
I think it's of our nature to create enemies amongst ourselves, to hate our neighbor.
That's because we live in chaos, and because we feel as though we're supposed to be in opposition with things.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I mean, did Jesus face the devil for 40 days in the desert? Like, I mean, we have oppositions, we have opponents in life. I think enemy, the more we talk about this, I think enemy is a subjective thought we put on something because we need it to be even worse than it is in our own heads. We need it to be an enemy. Whether we're feeding our own motivations and our own ambitions, we need an enemy. We need the antagonist. Or there's really not a reason to hate this person, so damn, they might as well be. We have to make them an enemy to justify and validate how we think about a given situation, which is probably a lot of people.
I mean, think about it. If anyone says anything against me to contradict what I say, what I think, there's a homeostasis that's imbalanced. Like, I have to change. It's a force. It's constant. It's constant. It's all just in flux.
Yeah, but was it Deion Sanders had the quote like last week, and it's like, your opinion of me doesn't matter because that's not the opinion of myself. Like, I don't.
Okay, so this is how I look at that. I'm not. Yeah. So I want your thoughts on this. Your opinion of me, it can matter. Like, it's potential.
I know. One of the most freeing thoughts that I have, that I've put a lot of weight into is, with the exception of a few people, other people's opinions of me are none of my business. So I don't value their opinion on anything else.
Okay, so here's something I've thought about this a lot on. I think when pride comes before the fall, right? So I've fallen too, like when I was paralyzed. So the self-help, the undergirding of self-help, for example, is help oneself. I would argue, the oppressed becomes the oppressor. So like, when we lack power and we seek it, that really helps us get on 2 feet. Once we get it, everyone's opinion is everything, because we become totalitarian. Like, the oppressed becomes the oppressor. The oppressor must love their enemies, must listen to the lowest common denominator. But listening to the lowest common denominator is not something that helps us get out of where we've fallen.
Yeah, well, that person lacks awareness though, and lacks enlightenment.
Who? Which one?
The person who the oppressor becomes the oppressor, the person who seeks power.
And I think that's all of us. Like until it isn't.
So
Moment to moment.
So I think this runs parallel to the thought of enlightenment, the thought of that spiritual journey. I think that's a human trait that we have, that you just mentioned, that desire, that chasing the power, the oppressed becomes the oppressor. And I do believe that the enlightened are those at which don't chase that power, and they don't become the oppressor, and they realize the evil that lies in becoming the oppressor, or having power. There's nothing about me so special that I should have power, and especially if I've relinquished all power, and if all things are following a plan bigger than myself, then what do I need to be in power? I need to be obedient. That's the grand instruction, is not to be in power. It's to
Well, when we have power, if we're not obedient, then we'll be crushed by our power.
Of course.
Yeah.
And so the person that then
becomes
get powerful through his obedience is not the person who seeks power in the first place. This person who comes into power.
Well, but I don't know who I'm going to be when I can't know what I'm capable of under any given circumstances.
But you can know
that's how I'm looking at it.
Like
that's part of the self-deception.
But so that has to become, so what are you rooted in?
Evil.
Well, then we got to change that.
Yeah, well, I'm not speaking just for I'm not just speaking just for myself. I think that that's all of us. That's the whole point. That like everything that we're doing is self-serving. It's for here. It's for this. It's for this. It's beyond, and that's beyond us. So we have to be reminded by the past to understand how to orient ourselves into the future in a way that doesn't destroy culture. And one of the ways to go about doing that would be, or arguably a foundational way to go about doing that would be to take some of the advice you had articulated earlier, like get more serious about
spirituality.
Yeah, the G word, it's a scary word to us, eh?
Why is that scary?
I'll speak for myself.
Well, I'm not asking anybody else.
Yeah, it's horrifying. I think because it could be true.
So what's horrifying if it's not true?
Well, if it's not true, then not much to be horrified about, because there's not much meaning. I don't see any meaning outside of survival, just for satiation and whatnot.
So why is the opposite horrifying and not amazing?
I guess that'll be part 3.
Chew on that one. I think it's horrifying as well. I don't disagree with that. And I wish I would have thought about the question a lot more when I was younger, when we're more susceptible to all kinds of stuff. I
think you're stronger than that, though. I'll challenge you there, because you've been helpful today. You're stronger than that.
Stronger than what? No, I think it would have been. I think it would have been. I think it would have.
Glad that it happened now.
Well, no, of course, but I think I don't know. I think it would have been something fun or interesting to. Right. So, but my point is that I've thought about it being horrifying. To me, it would absolutely be horrifying if the opposite was true. But then nothing matters anyways, right? So there really isn't a downside. I could see how it could be horrifying because it's so grand. And I've said this to people who have found their faith later in life. I have so much respect for them because I don't understand how you could actually accept it later in life. I accepted it very, very early on in life and then confirmed it, which I think is a far easier process. I'm not naive to that. To have all the intellect that a person could have by their mid-30s and then say, now I want you to believe that there's a giant puppeteer in the sky who's playing with everything, who killed your aunt from cancer, who has had the fires in Maui, right? Like, now I could answer those questions, but the answer doesn't even matter. It's simply the grandiose nature of just how big that is, like how big it is to believe in God and to believe that God loves you so much and that you are purposefully and perfectly made in his image. It is a massive thing. And that's why I believe that it changes lives when you accept it and you believe it, because it is so massive. I do. I have a ton of respect for people that have found their faith later in life. And we're not even talking the Christian faith. We're just simply talking about, monotheism and in nature and spirituality and the connectivity of all of it. It is big. And I don't think enough people respect. It's why I fear God. I fear nothing but God at all. I fear no man whatsoever, but I fear God, because if you believe in how grand he is and all the beautiful aspects and all his promises, you got a lot of power. So it's a huge thing. And I wish more people would view it as such an amazing and such a just the enormity of it. Because I think when you accept the enormity of it, then the experience is even more beautiful.